Zarathek stood 8 feet tall, her natural armor plates gleaming under the harsh lights of the War Council chamber. Her claws tapped nervously against the stone table as she watched her husband Marcus enter the room. He looked so small next to the massive Kytherian warriors who filled the ancient hall. Marcus walked quietly behind her, his soft brown eyes taking in the sight of her people for the first time. He carried a simple bag of books and research tools, looking more like a lost scholar than someone who belonged in a place built for war. The other Kytherians stared at him with barely hidden disgust. "This is your mate?" Torgan's voice boomed across the chamber. Zara's father was the largest Kytherian in the room, his battle scars telling stories of 100 victories, his amber eyes fixed on Marcus with the look a predator gives weak prey. "This soft thing is what you chose over a proper warrior?" Zara felt her armor plates shift with anger. "Father, Marcus is my husband. He deserves respect in our home." Several younger warriors laughed. One of them, Kreshtar, stepped forward. "Respect must be earned, cousin. What has this human done to earn anything from us? Can he fight? Can he hunt? Can he even lift a proper weapon?" Marcus said nothing. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face calm despite the insults flowing around him. Zara had learned to read human expressions during their time together, and she could see the hurt in his eyes, but he never fought back with words or anger. "Marcus is a xenoarchaeologist," Zara said firmly. "He studies ancient cultures and helps preserve knowledge. His work has helped many species understand their past." "Knowledge," Torgan spat. "What use is old knowledge when enemies come to kill you? Can his books stop a blade? Can his gentle words turn away raiders?" The War Council erupted in harsh laughter. These were warriors who had spent their lives fighting to protect Keith Prime from countless enemies. They understood strength and violence. They had no patience for humans who chose books over battles. Marcus cleared his throat softly. "Thank you for allowing me into your home," he said in careful Kytherian. His accent was perfect, which surprised many of the warriors. "I know I am different from your people. I hope to learn about your culture during my stay." "He speaks like a child," one warrior muttered. "So quiet and polite. Where is his pride? Where is his fire?" Zara remembered when she first met Marcus on the diplomatic station near human space. She had been sent to negotiate trade agreements, expecting to deal with typical human politicians. Instead, she found herself talking to a man who listened more than he spoke, who asked thoughtful questions about Kytherian history, and who seemed genuinely interested in understanding her people. Their relationship had grown slowly. Marcus never tried to impress her with displays of strength or boasts about his achievements. He simply treated her as an equal, something many Kytherian males struggled to do. He helped her understand human culture while learning about her own. When he asked her to marry him, it was with quiet certainty, not grand gestures. But now, surrounded by her people, Zara began to wonder if her family might be right. Kytherians were natural warriors, bred for combat over thousands of generations. Every challenge was met with strength and aggression. Marcus seemed to meet every challenge with patience and thought. "Perhaps your human would like to see our training grounds?" Kreshtar suggested with a cruel smile. "We could show him how real warriors prepare for battle." "That would be wonderful," Marcus replied before Zara could object. "I would be honored to observe your training methods." The younger warriors exchanged pleased looks. They were clearly planning to humiliate Marcus in front of the entire council. Zara wanted to protect him, but she knew that interference would only make things worse for both of them. The group moved to the training arena, a massive circular chamber carved from solid rock. Weapons lined the walls. Swords, axes, and energy weapons designed for Kytherian hands. The warriors began their daily practice, showing off their speed and power for Marcus's benefit. Marcus watched everything with intense focus. He asked questions about technique and strategy, taking notes in his small journal. The warriors answered his questions, but Zara could hear the mockery in their voices. They thought he was trying to learn skills he could never master. "Would you like to try holding a blade, human?" Kreshtar offered, selecting a training sword from the wall. It was the smallest weapon available, but it still looked massive in Marcus's hands. Marcus examined the weapon carefully, testing its weight and balance. "It's beautifully made," he said honestly. "The craftsmanship is excellent." "Try the basic forms," Kreshtar instructed, demonstrating a simple attack pattern. Marcus attempted to copy the movements. He was clumsy and slow, nothing like the fluid grace of the Kytherian warriors. The watching warriors laughed and made jokes about human weakness. "Enough," Torgon finally declared. "We have wasted enough time on this display. Human, you will stay in the guest quarters. Try not to break anything important." "Okay." "Could not hile. Could 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 not hile." As the council dispersed, Zara walked with Marcus toward their assigned rooms. She could see the embarrassment in his posture, though he tried to hide it. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "My people can be difficult with outsiders." Marcus smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "They're protecting you," he said. "I understand that. They see me as weak, because I don't fight like they do. Maybe they're right." "You're not weak," Zara insisted. "You're just different. Different enough that your father wants to challenge me to combat?" Marcus asked. He had heard the quiet conversations, the suggestions that a formal duel might solve the problem of his presence. Zara said nothing, which was answer enough. That night, Marcus lay awake in the guest quarters, listening to the sounds of the fortress around him. Somewhere in the distance, warriors trained late into the night. He could hear the clash of metal and the shouts of combat. He thought about Zara, about how proud and strong she was among her own people. He thought about the looks of disappointment on the council members' faces. Most of all, he thought about the ancient archives he had seen during their tour of the fortress. There were secrets in those old records, stories of ancient enemies and forgotten wars. Marcus had spent his life uncovering the past, and something about the Kytherian archives called to him. Perhaps if he could find something useful in their history, something that might help them, they might see him as more than just Zara's weak human husband. He decided to spend the next day exploring the archives. It was what he did best, and it kept him away from the warriors who clearly wanted him gone. The archives of Kyth Prime stretched deep underground, carved into the living rock of the mountain fortress. Marcus made his way through the winding passages, his human eyes struggling with the dim lighting designed for Kytherian vision. Ancient stone tablets lined the walls, covered in symbols that had taken him hours to decipher. For 3 days, Marcus had buried himself in the old records, while the warriors above continued their training. Zara visited him each evening, bringing food and trying to coax him back to the surface. But Marcus felt more comfortable here among the dusty histories than in the hostile environment of the War Council. "You're hiding," Zara said on the third night, settling her large frame carefully on one of the stone benches. "I'm researching," Marcus replied, not looking up from the tablet he was translating. "Your people have an incredible history. These records go back over 50,000 years. My people have a history of war," Zara said sadly. "Battle after battle, enemy after enemy. It's what we are." Marcus finally looked up from his work. "That's not all you are. Look at this." He showed her a section of text he had been working on. "This talks about the arts your people created between wars, poetry, sculpture, philosophy. The Kytherians weren't just warriors." "Were is the right word," Zara said. "We've forgotten most of that. The galaxy is too dangerous for a people to be anything but strong." Marcus turned back to his translations, but something caught his attention. A name that appeared repeatedly in the older texts. Veltar. He had seen it before, but hadn't understood the context. Now, as he pieced together more tablets, a pattern emerged. "Zara, who were the Veltar?" he asked. Zara's armor plates shifted, a sign of discomfort. "Old enemies. Ancient ones. Why do you ask? They're mentioned in dozens of these records. But the descriptions are strange. Listen to this." Marcus read from his notes. "The Veltar struck like shadows. Small, but deadly. Their warriors moved with impossible speed, turning our strength against us. Though they were no larger than younglings, they fought with the fury of 10 warriors. Propaganda, Zara said quickly. Ancient stories made to frighten children. The Veltar are gone. They have been for thousands of generations. But Marcus was already pulling more tablets from the shelves, his excitement growing. Look at this description of their technology. Advanced weapons, armor that responded to the user's thoughts, ships that could appear and disappear without trace. This isn't primitive mythology, Zara. These are detailed military reports. One tablet made Marcus stop completely. The text described a final battle where the Veltar simply vanished. Not defeated, not destroyed. They just stopped fighting and disappeared from known space. The Catherian record showed confusion and fear. Not victory. They left, Marcus said softly. They didn't lose the war. They just left. It doesn't matter, Zara insisted. They're gone, dead for millennia. Marcus continued reading late into the night, after Zara returned to their quarters. Deep in the oldest section of the archives, he found references to something called the Soul Render Blade, described as the ultimate Veltar weapon. The texts claimed it could awaken the true warrior spirit in any who touched it. Most importantly, he found fragmentary coordinates. The location of a Veltar tomb world, a place where their greatest warriors had been laid to rest. The next morning, Marcus brought his findings to Zara. She listened with growing unease as he explained what he had discovered. "You want to visit a dead world based on ancient stories?" she asked. "I want to understand who the Veltar really were," Marcus said. "These aren't stories, Zara. These are historical records. Your people fought a war against an enemy they barely understood, and that enemy chose to disappear rather than continue fighting. Don't you want to know why?" Zara considered this. Her people's history was built on military victories. But the Veltar represented something different. An unresolved mystery that had haunted Catherian culture for thousands of years. "My father will never approve an expedition based on human curiosity," she warned. "Then we go alone," Marcus said. "Just the two of us." A simple archaeological expedition. Against her better judgment, Zara agreed. Marcus's quiet enthusiasm was hard to resist, and she had learned to trust his instincts about historical mysteries. They took a small scout ship, officially logged as a survey mission, to catalog uninhabited worlds. The journey took 6 days through hyperspace. The coordinates led them to a system at the very edge of known space, where a small world orbited a dying red star. The planet showed no signs of life, but Marcus's sensors detected artificial structures beneath the surface. "There," Marcus said, pointing to readings on the display. "Underground complexes, just like the records described." They landed near the largest structure and made their way through an entrance that had been sealed for thousands of years. Marcus had studied enough alien archaeology to navigate the ancient security systems, while Zara's strength helped them move through collapsed sections. The tomb complex was vast and eerily preserved. The builders had designed it to last forever, and their technology had succeeded. Chambers filled with strange weapons and armor led deeper into the mountain, following patterns that seemed both alien and familiar to Marcus. "These corridors," Marcus said as they walked deeper. "The proportions are wrong for Catherians. They're built for someone much smaller, human-sized," Zara observed. They found the central burial chamber at the deepest level of the complex. A single figure lay on a raised platform, surrounded by treasures and weapons. The warrior was indeed human-sized, wearing armor that seemed to shift and shimmer in their lights, but it was the weapon beside the body that made Marcus's breath catch. A sword of impossible beauty, its blade seeming to contain captured starlight. Even after thousands of years, it hummed with barely contained energy. "The Soul Render Blade," Marcus whispered, recognizing it from the ancient descriptions. "Don't touch it," Zara warned. "We don't know what it might do." But Marcus was already reaching for the weapon. Something about it called to him, as if he had been searching for it his entire life without knowing it existed. His fingers closed around the hilt. The blade blazed to life in his hands, energy coursing through the metal and into Marcus's body. The chamber filled with holographic displays, showing images and text in a language that Marcus somehow understood. The truth hit him like a physical blow. The Veltar weren't aliens at all. They were humans, descendants of early Earth colonies that had been lost to known space. Cut off from their homeworld, they had evolved into something new, something designed for warfare in a hostile galaxy. Marcus! Zara's voice seemed to come from very far away. Marcus, what's happening? The holograms showed the full history, how the lost colonists had faced threat after threat, until they became perfect warriors. How they had dominated this region of space for thousands of years. How they had finally chosen to abandon warfare and seek a new path among the stars. Marcus felt the blade connecting with something deep in his DNA, awakening genetic memories that had slept for 50,000 years. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be truly dangerous. When the visions ended, Marcus carefully set the blade down. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anticipation. We need to take this back to Keith Prime, he said quietly. Marcus, what did you see? Marcus looked at his wife, this proud warrior who had protected him and defended him and worried that he was too weak for her world. I saw the truth about humans, he said. And I think it's time your people learned it too. Marcus stood before the War Council with the Soul Render blade at his side. The weapon was wrapped in simple cloth, looking harmless enough, but he could feel its energy humming against his consciousness. The Catherian warriors stared at him with the same dismissive expressions they had worn since his arrival. You claim this rusty old sword proves something about human history? Kreshtar laughed. Perhaps desperation has made you lose your mind, human. Marcus had spent 2 days carefully presenting his findings. He showed them the holographic records from the tomb, the genetic analysis of the Veltar remains, the linguistic connections between ancient Veltar and early human languages. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. The Veltar had been human. Torgan examined the wrapped blade with obvious skepticism. Even if your theories are correct, what does this matter? These Veltar, these humans, they are dead and gone. You are here and now, and you are still weak. Father, Zara began. But Torgan silenced her with a gesture. No, daughter. I have been patient with your mate. But this nonsense must end. He brings us old stories and broken weapons, expecting us to believe that his soft species were once mighty warriors. Torgan stood to his full, imposing height. If humans were ever truly dangerous, where is that danger now? Where is the proof that this pathetic creature before us carries the blood of fighters? The War Council murmured agreement. These were practical warriors who understood only what they could see and fight. Ancient history meant nothing if it could not help them protect their people today. Marcus felt the blade pulse against his consciousness. Since touching it in the tomb, he had experienced strange dreams and sudden flashes of knowledge. Fighting techniques appeared in his mind without warning. His reflexes had sharpened noticeably, though he had tried to hide these changes from Zara. The proof is in the blade, Marcus said quietly. The Veltar technology responds to human DNA. It awakens genetic memories that have been sleeping for thousands of generations. Convenient excuses, Torgan snorted. You ask us to believe in magic weapons and mystical bloodlines. I prefer simpler truths. His voice hardened with decision. I challenge you to ritual combat. Human, single battle, to the death or submission. When I defeat you, this foolishness ends, and my daughter will choose a proper mate. The chamber fell silent. Ritual combat was sacred among Catherians, a way to settle disputes that could not be resolved through discussion. Marcus had known this moment would come, but facing it still sent ice through his veins. I do not wish to fight you, Marcus said. Of course you don't, Torgan smiled cruelly. Because you know you will lose. Because you know you are weak. Zara stepped forward desperately. Father, this is madness. Marcus is not a warrior. This proves nothing. It proves everything, Torgan declared. If his ancient human warriors were so mighty, let him show us their strength. Let him prove that his bloodline carries the power he claims. Marcus looked around the chamber at the faces watching him. Some showed anticipation, eager to see him humiliated. Others showed pity, certain they were about to witness a slaughter. Zara's face showed pure anguish. The blade whispered to him, Not in words, but in feelings and images. He saw flashes of battles fought long ago, techniques perfected over thousands of years, the flowing dance of combat that the Veltar had mastered. The genetic memories were there, waiting to be unlocked. "Very well," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I accept your challenge." Zara made a sound of distress. But the ritual could not be stopped now. The War Council moved to the combat arena, word spreading quickly through the fortress. Within an hour, hundreds of Kytherians had gathered to watch the spectacle. Marcus unwrapped the soul-render blade in the center of the arena. Even under the harsh lights, it seemed to glow with inner fire. The moment his skin touched the metal, he felt the awakening begin. Torgon entered the arena carrying his favorite weapon, a massive two-handed sword that had claimed dozens of lives. He moved with the confidence of a warrior who had never lost a single combat. "Choose your death, human," Torgon called. "Quick and merciful, or slow and painful. I offer you this one kindness for my daughter's sake." Marcus said nothing. He was listening to the voice of the blade, feeling genetic memories flood his consciousness. His stance shifted subtly, his grip on the weapon adjusting to accommodate techniques that felt both alien and natural. The first exchange came quickly. Torgon charged forward with overwhelming force, his massive sword cutting through the air with deadly precision. Marcus stepped aside at the last possible moment, the blade passing inches from his head. The crowd roared approval at what they saw as Torgon's dominance. But Marcus had not dodged randomly. He had moved exactly where the awakening memories told him to go. His counterstrike caught Torgon across the ribs, a light touch that left a thin red line through the Kytherian's armor. Torgon stumbled, more from surprise than injury. No one had ever landed a hit on him so quickly in a duel. He turned to face Marcus with new respect, and perhaps the first touch of concern. Marcus felt the changes accelerating in his body. His reflexes sharpened further. His strength increased beyond normal human limits. The blade was awakening genetic modifications that had been dormant for 50,000 years, turning him into something closer to his Veltar ancestors. "Impossible," Kreshtar breathed from the watching crowd. "How did he move so fast?" The second exchange lasted longer. Torgon fought with all his skill and experience, but Marcus seemed to anticipate every attack. He flowed around the larger warrior's strikes like water, always moving, never where Torgon expected him to be. The soul-render blade began to sing as it cut through the air, leaving trails of light that made the watching Kytherians gasp in amazement. Marcus's movements became more fluid with each passing moment, more precise, more deadly. "What is happening to him?" Zara whispered. Torgon was breathing heavily now, his confidence shaken. The human who had seemed so weak was fighting with skills that matched or exceeded his own. More disturbing, Marcus showed no signs of tiring while Torgon could feel his strength beginning to fade. "You cheat somehow," Torgon accused, desperation creeping into his voice. "No human fights like this." "You're right," Marcus replied, his voice carrying a new edge. "No modern human fights like this. But I am remembering what humans used to be." "Right." Marcus began to press his attack. The blade moved in patterns that seemed impossible, striking from angles that defied geometry. Torgon found himself driven back, step by step, his defense crumbling under the relentless assault. The watching Kytherians fell silent. They were witnessing something beyond their understanding, watching their greatest warrior being systematically defeated by the quiet human they had dismissed as harmless. Torgon's sword shattered under a perfectly placed strike from the soul-render blade. The Kytherian leader fell to his knees, weaponless and beaten. Marcus could have killed him easily, but instead he stepped back and lowered his weapon. "I yield," Torgon gasped, the words torn from his throat. "You have won." Marcus stood over his defeated opponent, the blade still humming with power in his hands. Around the arena, hundreds of Kytherians stared at him in stunned silence. The quiet human scholar was gone. In his place stood something that made ancient legends seem real. The silence in the arena stretched impossibly long. Marcus stood over the defeated Torgon, the soul-render blade glowing in his hands like captured starlight. Every Kytherian in the crowd stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to terror. Torgan struggled to his feet, his massive frame trembling with exhaustion. "What are you?" he whispered. Marcus felt the blade's consciousness flowing through his mind, showing him visions that stretched back 50,000 years. The weapon was more than metal and energy. It was a repository of Veltar knowledge, designed to awaken the dormant potential in human DNA. "I am what humans used to be," Marcus said, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Before we chose civilization over conquest. Before we forgot what our ancestors knew." The blade pulsed, sending out a quantum signal that rippled through hyperspace faster than light itself. Across the galaxy, on thousands of human worlds, people stopped what they were doing, as genetic memories stirred to life. On the trade station Meridian, a human negotiator named Sarah Chen felt her perception sharpen suddenly during a difficult meeting with Zalarian merchants. She found herself reading their micro-expressions perfectly, anticipating their moves 3 steps ahead. The deal that had been going badly for weeks suddenly swung in humanity's favor as Sarah displayed tactical brilliance that left the aliens speechless. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Marcus Thompson felt his muscles strengthen as he lifted equipment that should have been impossible for one person to move. His co-workers watched in amazement as he completed tasks that normally required heavy machinery, moving with efficiency that seemed supernatural. In the depths of space, Captain Lisa Rodriguez felt her awareness expand as she commanded her cargo hauler through a pirate ambush. Her crew watched in awe as their usually cautious captain outmaneuvered 6 attack ships, turning what should have been a massacre into a complete victory for the humans. The awakening spread like wildfire through human space, carried by quantum entanglement networks that the Veltar had embedded in human genetics millennia ago. Each activation triggered others, creating a cascading effect that reached every human settlement in known space. Back on Keith Prime, Marcus was experiencing the full weight of Veltar history. The memories flooded through him. Battles fought across 100 worlds. Strategies that had brought empires to their knees. Technologies that had made the Veltar masters of their region of space. "We were not just warriors," Marcus said, his eyes now showing flecks of silver that hadn't been there before. "We were the most feared fighting force in the galaxy." Other species built their entire military doctrines around the assumption that they might someday have to face us in battle. The blade showed him why the Veltar had disappeared. They had reached a point where their very existence threatened the balance of galactic civilization. Every species lived in terror of human expansion. Wars were fought not for resources or territory, but simply to prevent humanity from growing stronger. "They chose to leave," Marcus continued, the memories flowing through his voice. The Veltar realized that their presence was turning the galaxy into a place of constant fear and violence. So they scattered their people across known space, suppressed their genetic modifications, and became quiet farmers and traders and scholars. Kreshtar stepped forward, his weapon forgotten at his feet. "You're saying humans chose to become weak? That you made yourselves prey deliberately?" "Not weak," Marcus corrected, restrained. "There is a difference." Communication arrays throughout Keith Prime began receiving frantic messages from across the galaxy. Reports flooded in of humans displaying impossible abilities. Strategic brilliance that overturned military conflicts. Physical feats that defied explanation. Technological insights that solved problems that had puzzled scientists for decades. Zara read the reports with growing alarm. "Marcus, what have you done? Humans across the galaxy are changing." Marcus felt the blade's influence reaching its peak. The genetic modifications were fully active now, turning him into something closer to what the original Veltar had been. His strength had increased tenfold, his reflexes operated at superhuman speeds, and his tactical awareness had expanded to encompass complex battlefield scenarios he had never studied. "I haven't done anything," he said. "The blade has. It was designed as a key, a way to reawaken human potential when it was needed. It's sending activation signals to dormant genetic sequences in every human alive." More reports arrived hourly. On the border worlds, human colonies that had been barely holding their own against alien raiders suddenly began winning decisive victories. Pirate fleets that had terrorized shipping lanes for years found themselves outmaneuvered and destroyed by human freighter captains who had transformed into tactical geniuses overnight. The galactic communications networks buzzed with confusion and growing fear. Alien governments that had dismissed humanity as a minor species suddenly found themselves dealing with a civilization that was rapidly becoming something entirely different. "The Council of Worlds is calling emergency sessions," Zara reported, her voice tight with concern. "Every species is mobilizing their fleets. They think humanity is preparing for conquest." Marcus felt the weight of what was happening. The careful balance that had existed for thousands of years was crumbling. Humanity was remembering what it had once been, and the galaxy was reacting with predictable terror. "They're not wrong to be afraid," Marcus admitted. "The genetic memories include strategic knowledge that could overrun half the known galaxy within a generation. My ancestors weren't just good at fighting, they were good at everything that mattered for galactic dominance." Torgon had been listening to the reports with growing understanding. This is why the old records spoke of the Veltar with such fear. They weren't just another enemy species. They were your people, and they were unstoppable. Until they chose to stop, Marcus corrected. "The question now is whether modern humans will make the same choice." The blade whispered to him of possibilities. He could feel the awakening humans across the galaxy, each one a potential weapon of tremendous capability. With the right coordination, the right leadership, humanity could reclaim its position as the dominant species in known space. But he also felt the weight of responsibility. The Veltar had abandoned their power because they understood what it cost. Not just for their enemies, but for themselves. Constant warfare had begun to hollow out their civilization, turning them into beings who knew only conflict. "I can stop this," Marcus said finally. "The blade responds to my will. I can send out a dampening signal, put the genetic modifications back to sleep." "Why would you do that?" Kreshtar demanded. "Your people could rule the galaxy. Why would you choose weakness again?" Marcus looked at Zara, at the fear and hope warring in her expression. He thought about the humans across the galaxy who were experiencing their first taste of true power, and the choices they would make in the coming days. "Because ruling through fear isn't ruling at all," he said. "It's just organized violence. And because my wife taught me that strength means knowing when not to use your power." The blade pulsed one final time, its energy reaching across the galaxy to touch every awakened human mind. The choice was before them all. Embrace their ancestral nature and become conquerors. Or follow the path the Veltar had chosen, and remain citizens of a larger galactic community. Across human space, people felt the genetic modifications stabilizing rather than growing stronger. The awakening had shown them what they could be, but it was up to them to decide what they would be. Marcus set the soul render blade aside, though he could feel its connection to him would remain forever. The quiet scholar was still there beneath the awakened warrior, but both were part of who he was now. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. 3 months after the awakening, Marcus stood in the same archives where he had first discovered the truth about the Veltar. The ancient stone tablets remained unchanged, but everything else in the galaxy had shifted dramatically. The emergency session of the Council of Worlds had lasted for weeks. Representatives from every major species had gathered on the neutral station of Harmony Point, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Humanity's sudden transformation had shattered every assumption about galactic politics. Marcus had been called to testify about what had happened. He stood before the assembly in the same quiet manner he had always used. But now when he spoke, entire civilizations listened carefully to every word. "The genetic modifications are stable," he had told them. "Humans now have access to enhanced physical and mental capabilities, but we have chosen to limit their expression. We remember what our ancestors were, but we do not wish to repeat their path." The Zalarian ambassador had asked the question that everyone was thinking. "How do we know humans will keep this promise? How do we know you won't change your minds and decide to conquer us all?" Marcus had smiled at that. The same gentle expression that Zara had fallen in love with years before. "Because we've already had the opportunity to do exactly that, and we chose not to. That should tell you something about who we are now." The evidence supported his words. Across human space, The awakened population had used their new abilities to solve problems rather than create them. Border conflicts that had simmered for years were resolved through negotiations, led by humans who could understand alien psychology with startling clarity. Pirate attacks dropped to almost nothing as human freighter captains proved impossible to ambush or outmaneuver. Most surprisingly to the alien observers, human colonies began offering aid to struggling alien settlements. Enhanced human engineers solved infrastructure problems that had plagued other species for decades. Human doctors with improved pattern recognition found cures for diseases that alien medicine had given up on. "We're not interested in ruling anyone," Marcus had explained to the council. "We're interested in being good neighbors." The awakening reminded us what we're capable of, but it also reminded us why our ancestors chose a different path. Now, back in the archives of Keith Prime, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. The Soul Render blade rested in a place of honor in the Catherian War Council chamber, no longer active but still radiating a sense of contained power. Torgon had insisted it remain there, as a reminder of what had transpired. Zara entered the archive chamber, moving with her usual fluid grace. Their relationship had evolved since the awakening, both of them adjusting to the reality that Marcus was no longer the helpless human who needed her protection. "The latest reports came in," she said, settling beside him among the ancient tablets. "The Terran Federation has officially declined the Council's offer to join as a senior member species." Marcus nodded. The offer had surprised everyone, including humanity itself. The Council of Worlds had decided that any species capable of overnight military dominance deserved a permanent seat at the galactic table. But the human government had politely refused, choosing to maintain their current status as a participating member rather than seeking elevated position. "Good," Marcus said. "Power that's given freely because people fear you isn't really power at all. It's just delayed rebellion." Zara studied her husband's face. The silver flecks in his eyes had faded somewhat over the past months. But they never disappeared entirely. He was still Marcus, still gentle, still thoughtful, still more comfortable with books than battles. But now there was an edge to him that hadn't existed before. A sense of contained capability that changed how others perceived him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Limiting the awakening the way you did? Some of the human colonies are saying you robbed them of their birthright." Marcus considered the question. He could feel the genetic modifications still active in his system, providing enhanced strength and reflexes that he used carefully. Across human space, millions of people were learning to live with similar changes, finding ways to integrate their new capabilities into peaceful lives. "No," he said finally. "Power without wisdom is just destructive force. The Veltar learned that lesson the hard way. We don't need to repeat their mistakes." Reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. The initial panic among alien governments was giving way to cautious optimism. Human merchants were proving to be extremely fair in their dealings, their enhanced pattern recognition allowing them to create trade agreements that benefited all parties. Human explorers were making breakthrough discoveries but sharing them freely rather than hoarding them for strategic advantage. The biggest change was in how other species viewed humanity. The dismissive attitude that had characterized alien-human relations for centuries had evaporated overnight. Now, when human representatives spoke in galactic forums, their words carried weight that came from demonstrated capability rather than fear. "Your father stopped by earlier," Zara mentioned. "He wanted to thank you again for showing mercy during your duel." Marcus smiled. Torgan had become one of his strongest supporters after their battle, finally understanding that Marcus's gentleness came from choice rather than weakness. The old warrior had even started asking Marcus for advice on military strategy, impressed by the tactical insights that came with awakened Veltar memories. "He's a good man," Marcus said. "He was protecting his daughter from what he saw as a threat. I can't fault him for that." The archives had become Marcus's regular retreat, a place where he could study the full history of the Veltar without interruption. The ancient tablets told a complete story now that he understood the language and context. His ancestors had been capable of incredible things, but they had also been capable of terrible things. "There's something else in the reports," Zara said carefully. "Some of the younger humans are pushing for more aggressive policies. They want to use their new abilities to correct what they see as galactic injustices. Marcus had been expecting this. The awakening had affected each person differently, and not everyone had his perspective on the responsible use of power. Some humans were discovering that their enhanced capabilities came with enhanced appetites for action and change. How many? He asked. Maybe 5% of the awakened population. Most are choosing the path you recommended, but there are exceptions. Marcus stood and walked to one of the ancient tablets that showed Veltar battle formations. The warrior people had started with noble intentions too, defending themselves and their allies from threats. But success in battle had bred hunger for more success, until they were fighting simply because they were good at it. We'll need to watch them carefully, Marcus said, and intervene if necessary. The awakening gave us the tools to be better than we were. But it's still up to each person to decide how to use those tools. Zara joined him by the tablet, her large frame dwarfing his human size. But after everything that had happened, size seemed much less important than it once had. The galaxy has accepted that humans are different now, but they're also waiting to see what we do with that difference. Then we'll show them, Marcus said. We'll prove that strength and wisdom can exist together. We'll demonstrate that power can be used to build rather than destroy. As they left the archives together, Marcus felt the weight of the Soulrender blade, even though it was chambers away. The weapon had awakened something in humanity that could never be put completely back to sleep. The genetic modifications would be passed on to future generations, ensuring that humans would never again be dismissed as weak or helpless. But the choices about how to use that inheritance would be made by each generation anew. Marcus hoped they would choose wisely. Outside the fortress, the twin moons of Kythe Prime were rising, casting silver light across the warrior world that had become his unexpected home. Somewhere among the stars, millions of humans were learning to live with capabilities their species hadn't possessed for 50,000 years. The quiet scholar who had stumbled onto ancient secrets had become something more, but he remained fundamentally himself. He still preferred books to battles, still chose understanding over force, still believed that the strongest people were often the gentlest ones. The galaxy would learn to live with awakened humanity, and awakened humanity would learn to live with itself. The balance would be delicate, requiring constant vigilance and wisdom. But Marcus believed it could be done. After all, humans had chosen to be gentle once before. They could choose it again, and sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the galaxy was someone who chose to be peaceful. Not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. The awakening was complete. What came next would define the future of known space.